Hi, welcome back to the next video snippet from the video novel Bedagiskwedawajokzeloumsen, A Dragon's Journey. Today we're going to read the first part of chapter 4. And if you're ready, we'll begin. Well, Beda thought when it awoke the following morning and had brushed the sticks and leaves that had covered it off its scales, maybe I might have acted a little impetuously. Beda looked across the clearing at what had once been the open and welcoming mouth of its cave, the entrance to its gleaming hoard, the portal to all that the dragon had ever known and possessed in its life. The molten rock had cooled and hardened. Beda told itself that it could, any time it wished, loose a shattering cry that would surely, maybe, break the solid rhyolite into little splintered shards and what? Let those two thieving human magpies out of their stony prison, so that they could return later with others of their kind and strip Beda's hoard bare? So the dragon would have to begin again somewhere else, but with no hoard and no place to hide it? No, Beda thought. Let them remain with the gold that they coveted until their bones have turned to dust and cover my treasures. I can always return to claim my riches after my visit to my Chinese kin. And besides, now I'll have much less to pack, Beda added, almost smiling, as if dragons smiled. Beda decided that it would fly east, but before the dragon could truly begin its journey, it would have to find the precious metals that would sustain it over thousands of miles of ocean and sea and island and mountain and plain and lake and river and steppe and tundra and forest and desert that it would travel before it would land in Chengdu to plunge into the preeminence that was the Shambhala of the yellow deity of the four faces. When Beda had sealed the humans who had begun to loot its hoard into its cave, kindly allowing the little mammals their wish to spend the rest of their lives surrounded by treasure beyond price. Unfortunately for those base burglars, they would not be able to eat the gold they had been so hungry for, nor breathe the silver, the very sight of which that had made them gasp. It had also sealed itself away from the provisions that would allow the dragon to prepare to leave its den, but Beda felt confident that it could gather what it required along the way. So Beda's first stop would be to the wreck of the SS Port Nicholson. The eighth of a mile of salt water that covered the rusting hulk would be little more than a minor inconvenience to the dragon, and Beda realized that a dip in the brine of the Gulf of Maine would wash off the leaves, dust, and twigs that had coated its once shining scales after it had slept under the stars last night. This Port Nicholson's cargo had been ingots of platinum, the densest noble metal and the easiest one for a dragon to call. Beda flew south, leaving the rocky coastline somewhere east of the crowded, polluted city of Portland. The dragon was headed for a ship that had sunk near Jeffrey's Ledge, or maybe close to where the bottom dropped off to create the Wilkinson Basin in the Gulf of Maine. The sun shone in a wonderfully blue sky as the dragon flew over the water. The wind-blown sea that now rose and fell in the Gulf of Maine, apart from the swells that had begun in the abyssal plain in the Atlantic and had blown in over the Georges bank, were at 4 feet. Trough to crest, near the shore and 6 feet or so further out in the Gulf. Beda saw these little ripples of salt water as a challenge and a place to dance in the air. It surfed the air just above the waves themselves, flying across the faces of the waves, never quite touching the water itself, with bottom turns and carves and roundhouses and snaps where the wind of the dragon's flight blew the ocean spray into fountains of mist that showed its joy in the flying and its mastery of the air itself. As Beda neared the trove of noble, white metal trapped in the hold of the sunken freighter, it passed over the other wrecked ships and boats that offered nothing of enough value to warrant the dragon's call. Deep under the water lay the cargo ships Cornwallis and the Lottie Merchant, which had carried nothing but the molasses that the New Englanders would distill into rum, the schooners Catawanique and Stuart Salter, that had transported cotton for the mills of Pepperell and Biddeford, guano for the farms of Aroostook, and softwoods for the shipyards of Brunswick, and lots of trawlers like the St. Christopher, the Robert and Rich, the Medford, and the Lillian T. Kerr. The lobsters and herring that they had carried were long gone by now. There was even a U-boat, the 857. After the dragon found the SS Port Nicholson, it called to a few of the bars of platinum that littered the floor of the Gulf around the broken ship. The platinum came to the dragon, becoming one with the worm, as it should be, and had always been. Fortified by the platinum, which once no fire or any Spanish artifice had been able to liquefy, Beda headed for richer pastures. It rose into the air, high above the waters that now to the dragon appeared as insignificant ripples on a great briny basin, in whose waters Beda had been baptized, and flew to the northeast toward the place that some of the Gaels called Albanois, and other humans simply called Nova Scotia. Burnt Coat Head is a little point of land that sticks out of the southwestern Nova Scotia into the Minas Basin of the Bay of Fundy, just at the mouth of Cobequid Bay. Burnt Coat Head, besides being beautifully rural parkland that transforms into a scarp of impressive rocks as it reaches the shore, has little to recommend it besides being the midway point between the tiny but old little town of Knoll and the even tinier but not so quite as old community of Minusville, just to the west, except that Burnt Coat Head has the distinction of being the location of the greatest tidal range of any body of water in the world, about 50 feet. Most, if not all, scientists believe that this tidal range is due to the resonant response generated by the correlation between the size and general shape of the Bay of Fundy and the complementary lunar gravitational cycles that push and pull at the Earth's water and cause our planet's tides. Tides, yeah, right. Actually, the movement of the waters is the result of the living presence. That's the respiration, regulation, growth, nutrition, transport, synthesis, excretion, and occasional reproduction of Apatamkin, the sea serpent. The Passamaquoddy, until they were moved off their coastal lands by the Europeans in the 1600s, spent their time spearing and netting marine mammals, fish, mollusks, and crustaceans, capturing and consuming the same diet as their monstrous aquatic neighbor. Apatamkin lives and keeps its hoard in an undersea cave in Passamaquoddy Bay at the mouth of the Bay of Fundy, but since the waters are the serpent's to move at its whim and will, it travels through the bay at its pleasure. The legend of the great fanged serpent that lurks in the surging tides, waiting to find the unaware and drag them to their doom, has persisted for hundreds of years. The modern, educated people who live near the Bay of Fundy are sophisticated and disparage the ancient tribal stories. But when those modern men chose to walk near the broad inlet of Passamaquoddy, they do so in the light of day. And when the wind howls a forlorn, keening wail, stories of a red-haired woman who left the land to haunt the waters are still spoken in hushed conversations. Apatamkin was never a fire-haired mortal woman. It was never the least interested in murdering silly children or incautious watermen. It had always been a sea serpent, a dragon of the waters, and like any dragon, Apatamkin sought treasure and lusted after the precious metals and crystals that some of the humans also valued. Apatamkin had found, to its amazement and consternation, that its ability to draw the waters to it and then thrust the waters away with a fabulous and dynamic vigor had made it seemingly invisible to the humans, just as the lies the humans told of the serpent had made it the stuff of legend. So the sea serpent lived in its cave in the little bay and moved the waters back and forth. As the waters churned in tidal paroxysms, ships were overcome by the waves and sank, and when they did, Apatamkin gathered up their cargoes, keeping the treasures and allowing the dross to float away.